Testing. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, have a lot to get into, so A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There we go. Okay, I had the YouTube up, so it's causing some interference. So inshallah, we'll get right into it again. This is meant to be a collaborative discussion. Want people to participate, whether it's in the chat or live. If you're on YouTube, just know that your comments in the chat will be lagged. Like we'll see it, maybe 30 seconds after you post it. It's best to be right into the Zoom call, which you can, I'll see if I can share the link actually. I don't see the link here. Anyway, it's best to be right into the Zoom call. That way you can directly participate. And where is the chat? Let's see. Okay. Hold on one second. Stop sharing. That's what I do. Stop sharing. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So I got the chat up. So let's get right into it. Again, if you have any questions, post it in the chat, whether it's on Zoom or YouTube, and I will try to address it. We want to have an open conversation about these things. We're talking about spiritual abuse. Unfortunately, I'm traveling, so I'm in like a hotel little conference room, and hopefully nobody comes in and disturbs us. But we were supposed to cover chapter 2 this week, which was the definition of spiritual abuse, but I didn't bring my book with me to go over my notes, but we can kind of just cover it. And if anything I missed, we can cover it in the next session. One thing to think about before we get to the end is we have to determine what we want to discuss during Ramadan, or if we want to discuss anything related to this during Ramadan. So think about that. I'll ask again at the end, and I'll also ask for input offline as well. So let's get right into it, because I got a lot of stuff that I wanted to cover. I probably won't get through it all today, but inshallah, we'll see. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay. So, again, this is about Sufi cults and spiritual abuse, and we're primarily using the book of the Sufi Lighthouse as a guide. Last week, let me enter you in there. Okay, I think Albert has me. So, last week, we just went over some of the last questions, the frequent asked questions in the book. The one was, are spiritual abusive people easy to identify? And again, it's easy once you've seen the signs and been through it. While you're going through it, it might not be so easy to identify while you're in it. The next question we answered was, what are the consequences after waking up? And again, people can feel shame, depression, betrayal, self-doubt, mistrust, and alienation. What forms does spiritual abuse take? And again, it could be an exploitation of power, veneration, money, sexual abuse. But the biggest thing is that the person that is claiming to be able to guide you somewhere religiously actually does not have the ability to do so. What is the most frustrating part about informing cult members? And for those of us that are involved in giving dawah to these cult members and trying to get them to wake up, we feel this all the time. Nobody believes you. They start to victim blame. They're in denial and all these different things. Does abuser need direct contact to control victims? And the answer is no, because we've seen that with the cult of TMOA, where the Mubarak Jalani was in Pakistan, and he was the leader and be able to control the cult from overseas. So this week, I'm going to try to get through defining spiritual abuse, giving examples. And then what we're going to do is also do like a test our skills session, where I'm going to give something from the authentic Quran and the Sunnah, and we're going to kind of test ourselves to see how these things can be used to manipulate and abuse people. When you take them out of context and apply your own meanings to them. So first, let's quickly define spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse basically is using religious principles or religious texts to exert power and control over a victim for personal gain. So when you talk about any situation of abuse, there's basically a few things that go into all formulas, no matter what type of abuse you're talking about. You're talking about someone using their power over somebody to take advantage of them, abuse them for their own personal gain, right? So if we look at domestic abuse, right, there's typically a husband and a wife. A husband may abuse his wife because he's physically stronger. That's the power he has over her, right? Other power is that maybe she doesn't feel that she can leave him because she won't be able to take care of herself. So there's a financial power control over there, right? With religious context and spiritual abuse, the power is the manipulation of the religious principles and the text, where these abusers use the religion to benefit themselves and abuse others, right? And in 99% of the situations, they take the meanings of the text, the meanings that were, the principles of the religion, and twist them and distort them. Okay, so that's the basic definition. Some other characteristics is that it's a form of emotional and psychological abuse. However, we've seen TMOA is also a form of physical abuse, where people are like they might violate a policy, has nothing to do with Sharia, has nothing to do with Islam, but they violate a policy of the cult group, and then they actually get physically beaten, or locked up, or other types of physical punishments. It's a systematic pattern of coercive and controlling behavior. So yeah, it's very systematic. Like you have to get. It really takes advantage of people's belief in Islam, um, and pretty much uses that belief against them because people don't want to disobey Allah and Rasulullah Sallallahu. Okay, it can be deeply damaging, and all the things that it comes with it is manipulation, exploitation, censorship. There's secrecy and silence. There's coercion. Um, the abusers take some sort of divine position in the way to abuse you, and there's always isolation, and then there's some sort of forms of punishment for violating or displeasing the leaders. And hopefully we can get to those examples um, at the end of the show or before we sign off today, inshallah. Let me check to see if there's any questions. Okay, so no questions there. Nothing on the chat. Okay, so we're good. Let me see. Okay, so let's keep it moving. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or anything, just hop right in. Those that want to talk on their mic, just unmute yourselves and interrupt me or type in the chat. Since I'm sharing, I'm not really watching the chat. I'll have to go back and forth to keep up. So next. Okay, so this is where we're going to kind of test our skills, right? To test our ability to recognize spiritual abuse or ways that people take authentic text. So there's a few ways that people use the religion, here we're talking specifically about Islam, to manipulate people. Okay, and that's what it is, right? Abuse is somehow you have to manipulate the person or exert some kind of power over them. So, for instance, you can use the actual authentic text, stuff from the Quran, stuff from the Hadith, right? And you use them and you put your own meaning to them, or you use people's misunderstandings of those meanings to do what you want. That's one way. And that's like a good way to do it if you're an abuser, because people, you can quote a hadith, you can quote an ayat, and on face value, it might appear to mean what the abuser wants you to think it means, right? And they rely on people's ignorance to actually facilitate this abuse. Another way is, instead of using authentic, like hadiths or ayats of the Quran, they will manipulate the text itself. And we'll see a little. I gave a little example of that as well. But then they'll use fabrications, right? Fabricated hadiths, or these stories. These, like, at least we call them Sufi stories, to like promote some kind of idea or principle that supports their agenda, but it actually doesn't come from Islam. So I'm going to use actual authentic hadiths and actual ayats from the Quran. Another thing is that they do is they rely on the translations, right? They'll put heavy emphasis on the translations of the Quran and the Hadith, right? Where we know as Muslims that the Quran and the Hadith, Islam was revealed in the Arabic language, right? So to truly understand the ayats, us being English speakers, we have to go to tafsirs that explains what the words means, because just reading face value, the translations, it actually doesn't give us the full meanings. It's an easy way to twist what the actual meaning is. Okay, so let's do the first example. And again, I want it to be I want people to participate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the ayat or the hadith, and I want you guys to think of how can this be used to manipulate somebody or abuse somebody, or how have I seen this used to manipulate somebody or abuse somebody. You could type it right in the chat, or you could just speak right up. And I'm going to try to breeze through these. I have a lot of examples, but it gives us an idea of how people twist the meaning of Islam for their own benefit. Let's see if there's any questions before we get into it. Okay, no questions, we're good. Okay, so let's keep it moving. All right, first example. Everybody should know this one. Hear and obey. And it comes from Surah An-Nisa, ayat 59, where Allah says, "O you who have believed, obey Allah and obey the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those in authority among you." Okay, think about that. Obey, O you who have believed, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and those in authority among you. And think about how that could be used, or how it is used to manipulate people, right? What's the message if someone from a cult or a cult leader comes to you and says this ayat? When do they usually say it? And what are they trying to get out of it? Again, type it right into the chats, or you can speak up. And I'm only going to give like a few seconds. If I don't see anything pop up, I'm just going to keep it moving and give the answers. Okay, so we have nothing there. So let's see. How's this used to manipulate people? So hear and obey, right? Basically, when people are using this, they're saying, don't ask questions, right? Just hear and obey your listeners, right? Or hear and obey your leaders, to blindly follow them. Don't ask questions, right? Even if you think it seems wrong, still do it, right? Still do it. And you'll see one of the ways that they manipulate this ayat is that this is not even the whole ayat, right? As those of us that know, this is not the whole ayat, right? What happens is they actually, instead of saying, "Oh, you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and obey those in authority among you," instead, it gets dwindled down, right? It gets dwindled down first to hear and obey those in authority above you, right? So then they just cut off Allah and Rasulullah. So now psychologically, now you're identifying, I have to listen to those that are in charge of me, right? No matter what. Then they even break it down even further, and then all you'll hear is hear and obey, hear and obey, hear and obey, right? So that's the way that they manipulate the actual text of the Quran, and basically suggest that these ayats basically mean hear and obey. Don't question anything, right? Of course, we do not question Allah, and we do not question Rasulullah. And anything that they command us to do, we do it, as long as it's within the correct understanding of what they commanded, not manipulating it, right? Our leaders, if they're not following Holy Quran and Sunnah, then we don't follow them. Very simple. But that's one ayat that's commonly used to manipulate people. Okay, so let's get to the next one. Now think about this when you hear this. Remember, this is all from authentic sources. The hadith is, and whoever obeyed my Amir, he would have obeyed me. And whoever disobeyed my Amir, he would have disobeyed me. So in other words, Rasulullah is saying, and whoever obeyed my leader, or someone I appointed, he would have obeyed me. And whoever disobeyed someone I appointed, he would have disobeyed me. Okay? So think about that. Think about how you've ever heard this hadith, and it's Sahihain. When you hear Sahihain, that means from the two Sahihs, Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. That means it's one of the most authentic type of hadith. Okay, when it's in both collections. But think about that and think of how it's used. And there's other hadiths, right? There's other hadiths, there's other ayats that people use that have similar wording and phrasing that are used for the same thing. So think about how that is used to manipulate people. Right, Salam. Okay, so now how it's typically used is, again, do not question the leader. Don't question the leader, because the leader allegedly is getting their commands directly from Rasulullah and directly from Allah. And also, things like this are also used to give a person the idea that somehow their leaders are automatically connected to the divine, connected directly to Rasulullah. You think about it in the context of TMOA, the leaders claim, right, that they get their orders directly from Prophet Muhammad or directly from Allah. So if you disobey them, that means you're disobeying Allah and Rasulullah, which is not the case. Okay, right? So that it's not, but that's the way that they use something that's authentic and to manipulate people. All right. So let's go to the next one. I got a bunch here, and these are all gonna remind us of different things that we've heard through our lives. So the poor in paradise. There's hadith in Bukhari where Rasulullah said, I looked into paradise and found that the majority of its dwellers were the poor people. And I looked into hell and found that the majority of its dwellers were women. Okay, this is Bukhari. So again, think this is kind of like a double whammy here that can be used in two different ways, and has been used in two different ways, right? So hopefully the women probably could spot this one right off the top. But again, it says, I looked into paradise and found that the majority of its dwellers were the poor people. And I looked into hell and found that the majority of its dwellers were women. Okay. Remember, and this directly rates. Remember the cult we came from. They used to call themselves al-fuqara, right? The Jama'at of the poor, the Jama'at of the impoverished, right? So how is this usually used to manipulate people? Okay. All right. So it's used by basically give up all your money, right? Even no matter how successful you get, no matter what good job you get, career, business, whatever, you should be giving up all your money to your leaders, because really it's better to be poor, right? It's actually, some people, like for instance in TMOA, people lived in these impoverished conditions, no running water, no electricity, no septic, right? Holes in the floors, right? Deplorable conditions. And they would actually think like, oh, I'm actually being holy right now. I'm getting blessings for living like this. Okay. There's nothing wrong with being unworldly, right? They call it zud, right? You don't connect to material possessions. You're not worldly, but there's also nothing wrong with being successful and being rich, right? Many of the Sahabas were very rich, but they lived very simple lives. They gave to charity, right? But they also took care of their responsibilities, right? They didn't give up their hard earnings, right, to make somebody else rich, okay? But because when you look in the context of TMA, like, oh yeah, give us all your money, give us all your money. Meanwhile, you have people that became millionaires and their families fight over millions of dollars of inheritance, right? While their followers are poor. And you'll see in these cult contexts, there's only one group that's being kept poor, and that's the followers, while the leaders are living, the best lives. Okay, so this hadith is used to like basically say it's better to be poor, and it kind of is better to be poor because you don't have to face the test of misappropriating your money, having all this wealth and not giving to charity and not helping others, right? But everybody has their own tests and trials. The other part of it is, so I've heard people use this hadith to basically say that women are evil, right? Because the majority of women are in hellfire, right? Or the majority of people in hellfire are women. So women are evil. That means anything you do, anything you say as a woman, right? You could be in a marriage context. A husband might bring this up to say, oh, your ideas are bad. Like, you guys are naturally evil. You're bad. I'm not going to listen to you because, majority of women are going to be in hell, right? Again, this is taking Islam and putting this out of context, right? We have to learn what the real meanings of these hadiths are. Okay, it's the majority, the habits of hell, majority of them being women, has nothing to do with just an inherent evil of women, and that no woman could be trusted or listened to and all these different things, right? Okay, so again, another way to manipulate. So let's go to the next one, charity. This is in Tirmidhi, and we should all have heard this. This is a very famous incident in the Sirah that we hear of, and it's when Umar radiallahu anh wanted to compete with Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And he said, today I will outdo Abu Bakr, because Abu Bakr used to beat Umar in everything. They used to compete with good deeds, right? They used to compete. Who's going to give the most charity? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And Abu Bakr would always win. So Umar came, and they were donating for a jihad, I believe. And Umar was like, today I'm going to beat him. So Umar came, and he came with half of everything he owned, right? And Rasul asked Umar, what have you left for your family? And Umar said the same amount, which means that he was giving half of all his wealth to the campaign for charity, and the other half he left with his family so that he could take care of his family. Then Abu Bakr came, and Rasul asked him the same question, and Abu Bakr said, but basically he gave everything. Abu Bakr came everything, right? And he came with just like something like tied, I forget the exact thing, but something tied around him, right? And it became one of his nicknames at one point. But and Abu Bakr said, I left my family, Allah and his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is authentic, it's reported in Tirmidhi. So what would people use this, or, in cult systems, how would they use this authentic narration to manipulate people? And people should know, because this one's actually used a lot, especially in TMOA context. Okay, no answers. So how it's used, again, donate everything and forget about all your responsibilities. Okay, now we're talking about Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anh. And the cult members would have you believe that you are deficient if you are not giving like Abu Bakr, right? If you're not giving everything. Okay, we've seen memos from cult leaders that tell people, like, don't worry about if your electricity is going to get turned off, and Allah will take care of you. Yes, Allah will take care of us, but he also says tie your camel, right? Nowhere does Rasul command us to give everything. We even had in TMOA, in the cult that we're from, where people were given 100% of all their earnings, 100%, right? And you see that Umar, radiallahu anh, who's the second best Sahaba, right? There's Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh, then there's Umar, radiallahu anh. This is the consensus in Sunni Islam, right? If you believe otherwise, you're actually not a Sunni Muslim, okay? So many hadiths that say that he's second. He gave half, okay? So just think about that. And this is just the way that people collect money. At the same time, the leaders aren't giving all of their wealth. They're not even giving half their wealth. They're not even giving a quarter of their wealth. Think about in the context of TMOA, where we're talking about millions, multi-millions of dollars. Millions of dollars have been collected from TMOA. That's become the wealth of Mubarak Jilani, his family. Like we hear about them, fighting over now. Noor has tried to steal the inheritance from all the children and take it for herself and all the properties. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars of assets, of worth. How much of that has been given to the Jamaat? None of it. I remember they tried to make a big deal out of Mubarak Jilani donating $1,000 to help build the school in New York. $1,000. To put that in context, for a millionaire, like that's someone who just has $1 million. That's like giving up $10, right? How much it would be normal people would pay for, like, to go out to eat or something, right? And people were giving guilt trips about, you need to donate money. Our sheikh gave $1,000 of his own money. Meanwhile, he's a multi-millionaire off of your backs. So again, we have responsibilities as Muslims, and charity begins at home. You'll hear I say, like, you're not supposed to give charity to someone who lives in Pakistan, right, over your family members who need the same exact help. Okay, go to the next example. And this one's kind of a tricky one, but it's used a lot. And when you hear it, for some of us, it'll remind you of like how some people reacted after they found out, like, whatever, you've been kicked out of the Jama'at or you've been transgressed upon. So divine destiny, or qadr. And Allah says in Surah An-Nisa, ayat 79, he says, what comes to you of good is from Allah, and what happens to you of evil is from yourself. So the translation is, what comes to you of good is from Allah. So good comes from Allah. And what comes to you of evil is from yourself. And I don't know how many times I've heard stuff like this from TMWA members when we're talking about transgressions and wrongs that happen in the cult. And stuff like this is used a lot by members, right? Where they actually try to blame Allah or blame the destiny, or actually victim blame the person that the transgression has happened to. So basically what they're trying to say with this ayats like this or rhetoric like this is that the person that transgressed you is actually not at fault. So if your cult leader stole money from you, married your child without your permission, um, separated your family, or all these took your assets, whatever's happened to you from the cult leader or the leader's administration, they're actually not to blame, right? Because Allah is saying here in this ayat that anything that bad happened to you is from yourself. It's your fault, right? This is a classic way to victim blame people, right? And just deal with it. Just deal with it because it comes from Allah. The good that came from Allah, and the bad that happened to you, it had to be something that you did. You need to look inside yourself to see what you did wrong that made this happen to you, right? And it's a way for them to actually ignore the problem. When that's not what the ayat means at all. The ayat actually is referring to like catastrophes, like droughts, plagues, natural disasters, not stuff that people transgress you upon, right? Or when they transgress upon you. That's not what it's referring to. But again, it's a way to manipulate people, and a nice way to use the religion to victim blame. Let's check to see if there's any questions. I think we're good. Okay, I think we're gonna have time to get through everything, inshallah. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. So the next one, tests and trials, right? This is in Bukhari, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "By the one in whose hand is my soul, no worry or grief or hardship befalls a believer, not even a thorn that pricks him, but Allah will expiate some of his sins thereby." So how can that be used to manipulate or abuse somebody? How can that be used? Prophet Muhammad is saying, by the one in whose hand is my soul, by Allah, no worry or grief or hardship befalls a believer, not even a thorn that pricks him, but Allah will expiate some of his sins thereby. How can that be used to manipulate somebody? And it kind of ties into the example that we just gave. So that anything bad that happens to you, it's actually good for you, right? So you should be thanking your abuser, right? You should be thanking your murshid or your sheikh for kicking you out and separating you from your family, because it's all good for you. It's all to make you a better Muslim. It's all part of this divine guidance, right? And it's another way to ignore the transgressions, okay? But they don't understand that the people that take this position of like, this is all from Allah, like the bad, and so we can ignore it. Like, this is all just a function of what Allah wanted to happen to you. He wanted to test and try you. And they actually ignore the actual transgressions that happen, right? Or the transgressor or the abusers. The pagans used to do the same exact thing, right? They used to say, and it's in the Quran, Surah 6, Ayah 148, where the pagans used to say, right, when they used to say, don't take partners with Allah, they would say, if Allah had willed, we would not have taken partners with him, nor would our fathers. So basically, like, they're saying, it's not our fault. It's not our fault that we're pagan worship, idol worshippers. It's not our fault that we associate partners with Allah. This is part of Allah's will. This is part of Allah decreed this. It's the same exact thing that these people are doing with the transgression. It's not our sheikh's fault that this XYZ happened. Allah is all part of Allah's plan. It's all Allah wanted to test you. This is what happened, right? And what that does is actually equates their sheikh or the leader with Allah, because they're saying that, oh, he's a function, like he's carrying out the destiny or Allah's qadr, which is not the case. Transgressors are held for their transgressions. That's why we have in Islam, we have Sharia, we have hudud, we have established punishments for people that transgress against others, right? You don't ignore it and say, oh, he killed him, but it's a test from Allah for the family. Allah decreed this to happen, so we ignore the person, the murderer. We don't do that. Okay, but this is the way that people are manipulated. Okay, no questions. No questions. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right. And so again, it doesn't always have to be on like a community type scale. It doesn't have to be on a cult level scale or a cult leader. Again, spiritual abuse can happen right in your household. You don't have to be part of a cult. You could be in an abusive situation right in your household, within your family, or within your small circles. Okay. So disciplining a wife. This is in Surah An-Nisa, ayat 34, where Allah says, as to those women on whose part you see ill conduct, admonish them, then refuse to share their beds, then beat them, right? And this goes through the order of how like a husband is supposed to admonish his wife for her doing something wrong, right? First you admonish her, like you tell like, hey, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. Allah says this, or so system says that. You admonish them verbally, right? You tell them what they're doing wrong. If they still don't do it, if they still like are doing the bad behavior or whatever, then the next step is you refuse to, sleep in the same bed with them. Like you go take yourself to the couch or whatever, right? Then it's still like it's not working, like they're not changing their behavior, they're still being disobedient, whatever they're doing, right? Then it says, then you beat them. Now, many domestic abusers, right, people, wife beaters, will use this ayat to justify what they're doing. Like, oh, Allah tells me in the Quran that I could beat you, right? And they're beating their wives up, giving them black eyes, breaking bones, and all types of different cowardly stuff, right? But then they'll use the Quran to justify their actions. Because the translation right there just says, then beat them. So, of course, that's not the Islamic position. We do not beat anybody, right? Islam does not condone domestic abuse. And you have to look into the meaning, the context, and the situation that this is being revealed. Hassan Basri, rahimahullah, said, this means that it should not cause pain. So in Islamic times, or the time of the Arabs when Rasulullah was alive, when he was referring to beat, it was like a tap with a miswak. It was more of a cultural thing, right? Where this would be a sign of like, I'm very displeased, right? We don't have that in our culture, right? We can't like tap our wives with a miswak or like a little pat on the hand, something that doesn't cause pain, and then that's going to be like a extreme like thing, like, oh wow, he's really mad, he's really pissed off, right? So that doesn't mean like, okay, so that means I have to beat them to cause pain. No, that doesn't happen. So again, that's a way that domestic abusers, and it's not even just like it's a cultural thing. Like you see this a lot in foreign societies where Muslim wives, unfortunately, will just deal with domestic abuse because they think this is normal, right? Because it's a cultural thing. Like, oh yeah, it's okay for our husbands to beat us, which it's not. It's definitely not. But don't worry, guys. I got one for the women too. You're gonna try to keep it balanced. Oh wait, what happened? No, we don't want that. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Compulsion. There is no compulsion in the religion. Okay, this is Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 256, and you hear this all the time from cult groups and cult leaders or cult members. There is no compulsion in the religion. If anybody's been keeping up with the Zainab Adams Jelani saga, Zainab Adams had a meeting with the Jamaat that got leaked out, and in it she said there's no compulsion in the religion. There's no compulsion in the deen. This is said a lot. How is this usually used by cult members or cult leaders to manipulate people? Just think about that for a second. I'm going to check to see if there's any comments or questions. Okay, we're still good. All right. So this is like a form of reverse psychology, right? And just for the correct meaning of this ayat is that there's no compulsion in the religion. It means that Muslims cannot force people to become Muslim, right? That's why we give dawah. We try to tell them, we give them evidences, proofs, there's argumentation, debates, all these different things that we do to try to convince someone to willingly become Muslim. Okay, there's even financial incentives in society, right? Like become Muslim, like you'll get taxed differently if you're a Muslim versus a non-Muslim. You have certain legal rights being a Muslim versus not being a Muslim. All these different incentives to help someone willingly become Muslim. You can't go and put a gun to someone's house and say, hey, take your shahada, become Muslim. We don't do that, right? So remember, this is talking about the religion of Islam. When you're talking about cult groups and you use this ayat to say there's no compulsion in the deen, and you're referring to people, oh, you can leave if you want. That what they're doing there is, one, they're equating their religious group with the religion itself, like we represent Islam, which we know that's not the case. And two, it's a form of reverse psychology, because there is actually compulsion. Like, for instance, you go back to Zainab Adams' audio, she said there's no compulsion in religion, but you all must. We are compelling all of you to come take bayat to me. That's compulsion. If you don't, you'll be kicked out. So compulsion is when you're forcing somebody or coercing somebody to do something by force. And the force is them basically getting some kind of consequence for not listening to you. Okay. And like, for instance, if you put a gun to somebody's head and say, give me your wallet, that's compulsion. You're saying, I'm going to kill you if you don't give me your wallet. Right. Same thing in the context of a cult. I'm going to kick you out and condemn you and excommunicate you if you don't comply with what I'm telling you to do. That's compulsion. You're forcing people to do things. You're never forcing people to. Is one thing to say, okay, Allah and Rasulullah command us to do this, but you're forcing people to do stuff that has nothing to do with religion. Okay, that's another way that people are manipulated in TMOA. I think we've got a couple more. Check for questions again. We're good. Everybody's quiet today. Okay. Doubt. We heard this reference to doubt in Noor Jelani's Juma Khutbah. Okay. And he's not the first to do this. This is done a lot. And it's a common theme, especially in cult groups, about this idea of how Muslims are supposed to treat doubt. So you have a hadith, it's in Tirmidhi, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, leave that which makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt. For truth leads to reassurance and lies lead to uncertainty. Okay. So leave that which makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt. Right. And you've probably heard different forms of this in the cult. You'll hear stuff like the only thing that removes doubt is certainty and all this. Right. And how is this used? Or how can this be used to manipulate people or abuse people? And again, they'll say doubt is from Shaitan. So if you're having doubts, then you must leave the things that are causing you doubt. And this is a very clever way they manipulate this one, because, like, for instance, if someone is listening to an R2F video, right, and they're like, wait a minute, this seven sultan belief sounds like it is shirk according to the evidence they're giving. Then someone from TMOA will say, wait, you're having doubts about the seven sultan belief? Well, since watching those R2F videos is causing you doubt, then you have to leave it alone, right? However, that's not how it's supposed to be. The thing that's giving them doubt is the actual belief of the seven sultans, right? People like R2F or anybody else that's been, whether it be R2F or just any other lecture or book or any other type of knowledge that someone receives, that's not the stuff that's giving that they have doubt in. The thing they have doubt in is the belief in the seven sultans or any other false beliefs and practices that are within the cult. So instead of using it in the right context, people use this hadith or this idea about doubt, saying doubt is from Shaitan and all these different things, to basically cause people to avoid the knowledge, the truth, and then turn off their radar so that they can just blindly follow the falsehood. Okay. So like there's another hadith here that counteracts that idea that says there was a time where some Sahaba came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they said, we find in ourselves thoughts that are too terrible to speak of, right? These could be doubts, these could be sinful thoughts, all types of things. And Rasulullah asked, are you really suffering from that? And then they said yes. And Rasulullah said, that is a clear sign of faith. So that doubt that they had inside of them, and there's other hadiths where Rasulullah says, like, leave everything that's doubtful. But the doubtful things are the beliefs, the practices, and we go to what is clear, right? We know that We are very clear on La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It's very clear, right? Anything else, like we're very clear how to make salah, very clear how to make hajj, all these different things that are very clear in the Quran and the Sunnah. All these other things, like staring at pictures, tying yourself up to dhikr, putting your fingers in your nose, and all these different things, right? Making tawaf around shrines and graves, making sajda to graves. These things are not clear. These things are, well, it's very clear we shouldn't do them, but if you came up in a cult, you might have been taught that these things are correct. But once you start learning real Islam, authentic Islam, you're going to start having doubt about these things. That means once you doubt these practices, you should stop doing those practices. Okay? So doubt in Islam is a form of guidance, right? Whenever the only negative thing that comes with doubt is if you're actually doubting Islam itself, like a doubting that Allah exists, a doubting that Rasulullah is a messenger of Allah, or doubting that the Quran is authentic, is revealed from Allah. These types of things. That's the doubt that where Shaitan's trying to get you to leave Islam. Shaitan is not going to convince you to follow the Quran and Sunnah. That's not part of his objective, right? Why would Shaitan come and say, hey, come follow these authentic hadiths in these Quran? No, he's going to tell you to say, no, go follow that stuff that's gray, the stuff that there's no evidence for. Okay, let's see. Check for questions again. We're good. Okay, leaving the Ummah. This is ayat. And the ayat says, and do not be like the ones who became divided and different after the clear proofs have come to them. And those will have a great punishment, right? So in TMY context, they have this idea of like, don't ever leave the Jamaat, don't ever leave the community. And they'll quote hadiths and ayats that basically say like, don't leave the Ummah, don't leave the Ummah, right? However, the Jamaat is not the Ummah. The Jamaat is actually not part of the Ummah. Your cult group is actually not part of the Ummah, right? But they conflate these two things to make people feel guilty or feel fear about actually leaving their cult, right? And even in TMY context, right, they'll say clear proofs. They'll refer to their miracles, their alleged miracles, as clear proofs, right, that you should be staying in this Jamaat and that you will actually go to hell if you leave the Jamaat. So you see how like a lot of the stuff that's been said, like even like Hussein Adams quoting Mubarak Jalani saying, if you leave this Jamaat, you won't be Muslim anymore, all these different things, they actually like come from misinterpreted, misconstrued ayats and hadiths, right? Twisted to their own benefit, right? Because if you do leave Islam, the Ummah of Islam, then there's a punishment for it, right? That's what that ayat is referring to. It's not referring to people leaving their cult groups. Okay. So now I missed one. There was one back here I wanted to cover for the guys. But there's a hadith, and we all know it. I don't have it down yet, but there's a hadith where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, and we know this, the best of men are the best to their wives, right? It's authentic hadith. We all know about it. And there's times that women will use this to basically what's the term? Basically take advantage of their husbands. So they have a weaker husband or husband that's really trying to take care of them and be a good man, this and that. They'll use it to railroad their husbands. Their husband can never say no to them about anything because they'll come back and say, well, the best of men are the best of their wives, so you need to let me do XYZ. And these are the same women that go outside with perfume and makeup and not covering correctly, showing their hair and all these different things. And the husband, he's cucked, you know what I'm saying? And he's just trying to be a good Muslim and maybe doesn't know his deen yet. And you see this a lot actually with new shahadas, right? Where Muslim women that have been Muslim all their lives, and they marry or get with somebody who's a new shahada, or maybe they're with the person before they became Muslim and then they're forced to become Muslim. And then alhamdulillah, the man's like, I actually do believe in this. I want to follow correct Islam. And then they're learning their Islam, through their wife who doesn't actually have a good understanding of Islam and is actually an abusive person, right? A manipulative person, a narcissist who's actually using Islamic stuff to their own benefit, right? you know, and they'll use this stuff like, oh, you have to let me do whatever I do because the best of men are the ones that are best of their wives. So that's another way of in a household how even a wife or a woman could actually be the abuser or the manipulator. But I forgot to put it down because typically, I mean, most of the abusive situations are with men. The abusive women are more with the psychological manipulation type of stuff. So the next thing that we're going to do, we have 15 minutes. And I wanted to cover this. I don't have the full list, I believe, but I wanted to cover this because I just thought there'd be some interesting things that would come up from talking about this. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go. I have dismissal notices. The dismissal notices for several people that were recently kicked out of TMOA for various reasons. I just want to just point some things out that we could learn from the language that they use in these dismissal notices. Okay, the first thing is I don't think, like, for instance, when I got dismissed, I got a full PDF printed memo with signatures and all that on it. They're not even giving people that stuff anymore, right? It seems like they're just sending messages through WhatsApp or whatever, and that's how people are getting notified that they're kicked out of the Jamaat. So like they're afraid to even sign their names to things, right? Like they must think like there's something that can come back to them. So now there's just like a message. Like just think about it. Like we've heard jokes or whatever, like on movies and TV or whatever, about like boyfriends or girlfriend breaking up with each other via text, right? Or something like that. Like this is pretty much what it is. Like you don't even have the enough strength and courage, you know, to directly address somebody officially, right? So what are you afraid of? But anyway, let's get right into it. Let me share my screen again. Okay. So the first notice I have is Ishmael Cuthbertson. I hope I'm saying that right. Ishmael Cuthbertson, or issues. And for his excuse me, for his dismissal notice, they said Ishmael was summoned before Majlis Shura. And he was summoned and he failed to appear, right? And they said he was kicked off for violations of community policy established by Morshid Kamil and has strayed from our way. And that even after he was suspended, so he was already suspended from the Jamaat, right? Just think about this. There's a couple like this. He was already suspended from the Jamaat, right? For failing to appear to their summons. They summoned him, right? Just think about the language that's used by these people. We have decree, we decree, you have been summoned. It's really narcissistic to use this type of language. You've been summoned. I decree, we decree. Okay. But he was already suspended from the Jamaat. And for what? Missing a meeting with the Shura Council, right? And violating policies of the Jamaat established by their Morshid Kamil. Didn't say anything about violating the Quran and Sunnah. Didn't say anything about sinning. Didn't basically say, oh, he blew us off, and that's why we suspended him. He broke some Jamaat policies. That's why we suspended him. Well, I wonder if they hold the same standard to everybody in the Jamaat. Like, for instance, this is a very interesting one. So I'll go further. It says that Ishmael became more deeply involved in haram music. And he even had a blasphemous song. I wonder what the blasphemous song was. We have to probably find that out, what this alleged blasphemous song is, right? Involved in haram music. So according to their sheikh, remember, he got suspended for violating the Morshid Kamil's policies. And one of their leaders' policies is that all music is haram, except for those that only use the duff, right? Meanwhile, the new leader, the up and coming leader, Noor Jalani, who's supposed to be the seventh sultan and this and that, he has plenty of videos on his social media of him listening to music, playing music, reggae music, totally haram music, isn't it? So is he going to get suspended from the Jamaat? Is he going to get kicked out for violating his father's policy? Obviously not, right? And then they quote a quote. Remember, there's no hadith, there's no Quran, any of this. Instead they quote their sheikh and say, "Follow our way if you wish to be saved, and if you wish to be favored by Allah Ta'ala." And what is this way? The way of Rasul Sallallahu. Okay, so basically, Allah, but they're claiming that their way is the way of Rasul Sallallahu. So why would you claim this is our way? Just say follow the way of Rasul Sallallahu. Anyway, so that was one dismissal. Contradiction here, they're not going to kick out their leaders that listen to music and play music all the way to the top with the seventh sultan himself, who listens to haram music and plays haram music on his videos and all these different things. So there's that. Ahmed Ali Baba, or aka Baba, he's the brother of Naima. I don't know her last name. Naima Jalani, the widow of Mubarak Jalani, mother of Sultan and Mudassa and Fatima, and I think she has another kid named Hamza, if I'm not sure, but that's her brother. So they kicked him out. So they said that he walked out and turned his back during a mandatory meeting held by Shura. Again, you're starting to see the theme here. Oh, you did something to the Shura Council. You disrespected us. We feel you disrespected us. So yeah, you're gonna get kicked out too, right? Didn't mention anything about violating the Quran and the Sunnah, right? Didn't mention anything about that. Didn't even mention anything about violating Jamaat policies. They said he spewed the same rhetoric of other uneducated people. So what determines that this person was uneducated? And what determines that, like, for instance, every single member on the Shura Council are uneducated. We know them, right? They don't have any Islamic education. Well, some of them didn't even attend as many retreats as these people that they're kicking out, right? But they claim he's uneducated. Okay. And he said derogatory remarks about Sultan Bahu. Oh yes, right, because you cannot speak against Sultan Bahu. Why? Because he's the one that started the whole seven Sultan belief. Because if you say anything bad about Sultan Bahu, that means you're saying something bad about the seven sultans. Again, back to this whole nothing about the Quran and Sunnah, right? Nothing about disrespecting Allah, derogatory remarks about Allah, derogatory remarks about Rasulullah, derogatory remarks about Sahabas, derogatory remarks about the scholars of Islam. No, none of that. Sultan Bahu, some poet who deviated from Islam and made up his own religion from Pakistan. And this is what's really, really amazing is that they say, in effect, he was kicked out a year ago. So he was already kicked out, right? Already kicked out a year ago. But they're informing the community now. Why are they informing the community now? Because they want to use as many examples as they can, right? Put the knife in and twist it, right? That's what they're doing. They're setting an example. He was already kicked out. Why does the community need to know, right? Only people need to know is people that are going to either not let him on the land or let him on the land, okay? So they did that, and this is to clear, like just rage, showing their power, punishing people for no reason, trying to punish Jelani's children and extended family for standing up against Zainab or saying anything against Zainab. And they said that he's excommunicated. So it's interesting that they excommunicated him, but they didn't excommunicate issues, right? And they excommunicate most people. Okay. Then you have somebody named Abdul Rahim Nuruddin, right? And this is his issues. Continued disregard and disrespect of the Shura Council. So again, back to the Shura Council. Oh, he doesn't like us, so we're going to kick him out, right? And then they started this quote now with the communities built on the bake and displaying proper adab. Okay, right? And then they say he's excommunicated. So the only thing he did was he didn't give the Shura Council the respect that they thought they were deserved, right? That's it. Kicked him out. Muhammad Shabir Wesley. This one was actually very funny, is that they said he inserted his opinion. You are not allowed to have an opinion in a cult. Who gets kicked out for inserting their opinion, right? In your own community in quotes, because it's not a community, it's a cult. And it was absolutely beyond his understanding. It's kind of the same thing that they said for Bubba, uneducated, right? Same rhetoric as other uneducated people, right? Him, He is absolutely beyond his understanding. Now, this guy is highly educated, right? Highly educated, right? He's not a stupid person, but it's totally beyond his understanding. Meanwhile, you have people on the shore accounts that we don't even know if they got their GED. Like, come on. Um, and they called out that he used a quote that says, "TMOA admin uses the playbook of Farron himself." I wish I had time to go into depth with his, because he literally said, "This is what they're gonna do because they're just like Farron. They're just gonna kick people out, blah blah blah," and they actually did exactly what he said that they were going to do. So imagine someone saying like, "Hey, you are Farron because what you're gonna do next is do X, Y, Z, just like Farron did." And you say, "No, I'm not like Farron," then you continue to do X, Y, Z, just like Farron did. You're just proving him right. Um, and they say that it was the result of him staying aloof from the community. So basically, like, yeah, if you're not heavily involved into the cult life, then you're gonna lose your way. And he didn't adhere to the guidance and discipline of Morshid, and this is very interesting, and Sheikha. When the hell did she was she given guidance and discipline? Right? They're kind of showing their hand here, right? We just seen posts online from Mudassar Jalani about how long Noor's actually allegedly been controlling the community since like 2008, right? Over a decade, okay, almost 15 years, right? Because as far on paper, the Murshid, right, Mubarak Jalani passed away 2 years ago. So how would Muhammad Shabir be following the guidance and discipline of the Sheikha? Why throw that in there? Okay, and then if he's been aloof from the community, how do you know what he's been following or not? Are you involved intricately in his life to know that he hasn't been following the guidance and discipline? Right? Maybe he hasn't been following the guidance of being like connected and being all up in the community's butt crack. But what if he's like doing the Mamilat and following the discipline and doing all the do's and don'ts of Mubarak Jalani's lectures and all that? You don't know how he's living. And they also excommunicated him. And again, just to remind people, excommunicated means that no one from TMOA is supposed to be able to communicate with them. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to talk to them, right? Excommunicated. Then you have Amira Ishmael. This is Ishmael's or Ishu's wife, I believe. So again, after instructions for mandatory meeting, so there was like a mandatory meeting, and then she went on social media allegedly and spoke ill of the community and enjoined in hateful rhetoric. And then they had that quote in there is that we're a community built on the bake and proper adapt. So she was kicked out for, they announced the community meeting and she went on social media and voiced her opinion or had some, was disgruntled about whatever, as 99% of TMOA members are. But they kicked her out. Again, connecting back to mandatory meeting, Shura Council, right? So look, let's just go down. We'll do it afterwards. But again, kicked out for voicing her opinion and somehow showing displeasure with something that has to do with the Shura Council. Faja Sabor and Sabra Shahid, their dismissal notices were exactly the same. Like they copied and pasted it. They didn't have enough to enough energy or respect for them to like give them their own individual notice. They just like copied one, changed the name, pasted it, and they were kicked out for endorsing social media posts, which means like they either liked it or commented on something, which speaks ill of Morshid's Kamil's spiritual successor. Now, I really want to highlight that because they could have just said Noor or Zainab or whatever she is, right? Her title, Imam of TMOA, current Imam of TMOA. But instead, they say endorsing social media posts which speak ill of Morshid Kamil's spiritual successor. So they had to connect it to the Sheikh, which shows you that they're not even confident with speaking about Zainab Adams in her own light, in her own shoes, by herself. They still have to attach her to the Sheikh. And they probably don't know this, but when people read messages, mostly they kind of skim through it, right, at first. So it's very probable that a lot of people read their dismissal notices and thought that they were endorsing social media posts which speak ill of the Murshid of Mubarak Jalani. So of course most TM were, oh, they're speaking bad about the sheikh. Yeah, get them out of here. But no, they were endorsing social media posts. So they didn't speak bad about Zainab Adams themselves, allegedly, according to this dismissal notice. They were actually just endorsing posts which speak bad about her. Okay, so again, you can't even go on social media and like or comment on something or have an opinion on anything. And they claimed, these two people claimed, that the decree of the Morshi to appoint his widow as the Imam of Tiamoy violated Islamic law. Well, it does clearly violate the Sunnah or the Hadith of Rasul Sallallahu. Okay, so just consider that, right? And again, so far we don't have anybody that they claimed violated Islamic law. The closest we have to it is that they claim that Ishmael or Issues made a song of blasphemy, whatever that is, right? They haven't quoted any hadiths, they haven't quoted any ayats or anything. And again, they say communities built on the bake and displaying proper adab, and those two were excommunicated. So even though they each had their separate notices, they said exactly the same thing. Then this one was a unique one, right? Because this one they dismissed Tuer and Naji, who were husband and wife, and the same notice, right? So you had you had Ishmael, right? And then you had his wife Amira were dismissed, and they had separate notices. These two were dismissed on the same notice. And again, this is so silly because they say they left the community some time ago. This is, just think about this, put this in real life. They left the community some time ago. Just like Bubba, who said, "Oh yeah, we kicked them out a year ago." Right? We kicked them out a year ago. Same thing with Issues. Oh, he was suspended a while ago, but we're gonna kick him out again. Now imagine you quitting a job. This is the same thing that kind of happened to me, but this is actually more blatant because I didn't notify anybody, or like nobody knew I left the Jamaat, right? So of course, like even though in actuality it was they fired me after I quit, they didn't know I quit. I already, like, you know what I'm saying, only a few people knew I quit. Here, the administration is saying they left the community, they quit a long time ago. they quit a long time ago. But you know what? Today we're gonna fire them. Could you imagine the business like saying like like, yeah, so and so, right? Let's bring it to sports, right? Imagine the Chicago Bulls coming out today and saying, yeah, Michael Jordan, he retired a long time ago, but we're gonna fire him today. it's stupid, right? But they said they dedicated their time to slander the community, and they said the information is well known. So if it's well known, again, why are you making this announcement? Why are you kicking people out? But they wanted to make an official announcement for those unaware, right? Again, they're just all these kicking out and all that is just a clear show of power. They want people to make their allegiances clear. They want to basically use compulsion for people to stay in the Jamaat and be afraid to leave, to be afraid to speak their opinion, and all these different things. And they were also excommunicated. Okay, so look at the themes that we have here. Ishmael, he upset the Shura Council. Ahmed Ali, he upset the Shura Council, walked out, turned his back to them. Abdul Rahim Noureddin, he disrespected the Shura Council. So now we're 3 for 3. 3 for 3. Mohammed Shabir Wesley, they don't say anything about the Shura Council. So he's the only one so far that didn't say anything specific about the Shura Council. So we're 3 for 4. Amira Ishmael, after instructions for a mandatory meeting, something with the Shura Council, 4 for 5. Endorsing social media posts. So Fajr and Sabra, it doesn't say anything to them regarding the Shura Council. So that's 2 more. So now we're 4 for 7. And Tori and Naji, then so basically half of the notices were something related to pissing off the Shura Council. Okay. Whereas in any really Islamic system of governance or leadership or community, the Shura Council, the leaders, or whoever you want to name them, Khalifas, Amirs, they're there to serve the people, right? They're there to serve the people. Yes, there has to be rules, regulations, and this and that. But are you saying that you can kick people out simply for not attending your meeting, simply for leaving your meeting, right? So you have people that are kicked out for expressing their opinions, for um, whatever, violating Jamaat policies, but nobody was actually kicked out for anything that had to do with Islam. Now, one of these people were kicked out for anything. They did not say, oh, this person committed adultery. This person does this. The closest one is they said Ishmael is involved in haram music. But at the same time, they will not check all the people in TMOA that listen to haram music. They won't check their own leader who listens and plays haram music. So that's what I got for today. Next week, we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do during Ramadan. Again, I'm going to kind of just wrap it up because I'm traveling. If there's any questions, you could message me privately on WhatsApp or text, whatever suits you. And that's it. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.